All right, so I'm really glad to see everybody in LaGrange. Thanks for being a part of worship. I know chairs are spread out, things are a little different there. I think that Pete put some tape on the floor and all kinds of things going on there. But thanks for being a part of what's going on there. If we've got any children that are with us today, I hope that you'll come along and fill some things out. If you're watching online, you know what you can do is you can take that sheet that we put together, our children's activity sheet. You can go to southcrest.church/resources, go right there, and you'll see at the bottom of the page that you can download that and you can follow along with what we're talking about today as well. And if you've got any questions about things that we talk about for the next little bit, we're going to do Q&A after the service. And so if you'd like to do that online, you can text your question to 678-590-1019. And this will be on the screen a few more times today while we're talking. And so if you want to do that, that would be great. And one other thing, if it's your very first time to Southcrest, then what I want to encourage you to do is text the word guest to 770-800-8622. If you're watching online, if you're one of our campuses, I want to encourage you to let us know that you're here. We would love to connect with you any way that we could. I think that would be a great opportunity for you. So just a couple of things just to let you know about as we're moving forward and going through some other things. Starting a new series next Sunday called Bible Binge. And so we're going to take a look at 6 books of the Bible in 6 weeks. So a lot going on with all that. Today, though, what I really want to talk about is 6 words. My God is a great God. My God is a great God. Because, I think, there's a song in our heart that all of us have. And it's kind of interesting. We've been doing some things on Instagram the last few weeks and asking people, hey, if you had a walk-up song, what would your walk-up song be? Nobody bothered to ask me what mine would be, but I tell you, I couldn't decide. I've been thinking about it. If my walk-up song would be either God's Gonna Cut You Down by Johnny Cash. And if you don't listen to Johnny Cash, it's time you started. Or my other one would be Bad to the Bone by George Thorogood. If I was going to do a walk-up song, why not just step up and, do it right? So, right? So, and you may have a song that, that's your favorite song and it's in your heart all the time and you're thinking about it. It's sort of your go-to song. But as a Christ follower, our go-to song, the thing that we say, the song in our heart, it may come out with slightly different lyrics, but it's really, my God is a great God. And, there's this old song that we used to sing a long, long time ago, and there's a lyric in it, and it says, God, tune my heart to sing your praise. Tune my heart to sing your praise. So I'm going to walk back here to this keyboard for just a second, because, one of the things that happens, now if we had a real piano, a big, ginormous, 12-foot long Steinway piano, somebody have to come in a couple times a year and tune it. And I don't know if you ever heard somebody tune a piano, but they come in and they do this. And then they go, okay, that's all right. And they just do, and for hours, this is all they do. And it just drives you crazy. And so every little key, they take a little wrench and they tune it and then move it just a little bit. And by the way, since I'm here, I'll play the one song I know how to play. My mother would be so proud. 4 years of piano lessons, all for that, right? So, but what I want us to do, I want us to use Psalm 95, and I want us to use Psalm 95 and walk through Psalm 95, and let's look and see how God can use Psalm 95 to tune our hearts. Because with all that we've had going on for the last 3 months with panic and what's true and what's not true, and stress and pressure and difficulty and celebrating and drive-by birthday parties and weird anniversary celebrations and things that we never thought that we would be dealing with. I think that we need to remember that God wants to tune our heart so our heart is in tune with His. And so that's what we really want to talk about a little bit tonight, and specifically about how do we worship. How do we worship? So 4 things tonight about worship. So the first one is this. is worship is about how we approach God's presence. Worship is about how we approach God's presence. So I want to show you this in Psalm 95:1, something we're talking about. And so let's get started in verse 1. And notice as we walk through here, all the different postures of worship in Psalm 95, because we could talk about this over and over. We could spend weeks talking about just this one psalm. But he says, the psalmist here, he writes, "Oh, come, let us sing to the Lord." And so, and for a lot of us, that's what we think about. We think, well, here's the deal is that it's all about singing. I don't like singing. I'm not really good at singing. And we think that's the only thing about worship. But there's about 150 different ways that the Bible talks about that we should worship. And so one of those things is singing. You'll see several other postures of worship as we walk through this today. But it says, let us sing to the Lord. Let us make a joyful noise to the rock of our salvation. So for people like me, we love these words, joyful noise, right? Because I don't sing so good, but I go, woo, yes. And I can do that, and I can stomp my hands. Stomp my hands? How about stomp my feet, clap my hands? How about we try that? But there's a lot that I can do to make joyful noise. And sometimes it gets on other people's nerves when you're making a joyful noise. And I say, hey, listen, I'm just, worshiping for the Lord. That's what's going on right here. So there's a lot. And here's what's really interesting here. It says, oh, come. Now this is really translated. It should be translated because we're going to see it again in another verse, the same two words in English. But in the Hebrew, that's really should be translated like, come on. Let's go. Come on. That's how it should be translated. Like, do you remember we used to have this stuff in America? We used to have these things called professional basketball. Have you ever heard of it? The National Basketball Association, NBA. Ordinarily, this is the time of year we be watching the playoffs, right? And so one of my favorite guys to watch is Steph Curry. Now, I don't know if you remember him because it's been a long time since we've seen basketball, right? But Steph Curry sometimes he's 24, 25, 26 feet away, and he'll just, he just takes that shot and he lets go of it. And before it even gets into the basket, he turns around and starts going the other way because he knows it's going in. And the first time I saw him do that, it was years ago, and I saw him take this shot and let go and start running down the court. And I told Laura, I said, I think he's a prideful man. And she said, And but then what he does, he says, come on. He exhorts the crowd, come on. And so that's what the writer of the Psalm says. He says, come on, let's go. And so let's not just sit here, but let's get involved in this. And it says, next verse, it says, let us come into his presence with thanksgiving. Let us make a joyful noise to him with songs of praise. And so again, what's he saying? He says, come on, let's go. Come on, let's go. And so that's something that a worship leader does. He says, hey, come on, let's go. Let's go do something. He exhorts us, he encourages us, let's go do this. And so I think the question that we need to answer is do we come to worship with something that just needs to get out? Does that ever happen to you? That God has been doing so much in your life that you're like, it's just got to get out of me. I just can't hold this in anymore. And so I say, my God is a great God. Listen, my God is a great God all the time. My God is a great God. When I'm going up underneath the connector in Atlanta, and I'm just sitting there, and there's like 38 lanes of traffic all the way backed up, and I'm not even moving. I'm sitting there going, you know what? Somebody's been life flighted out of here. There's 3 trucks that had a wreck or something, and I get up there and there's nothing. And I tell my wife, I say, hey, look, I'll tell you what, I can straighten this out in about 10 minutes. Here's what their problem is. And she says, they don't need you. They got this. Why don't you just drive and stay in our lane? Why don't you do that? Right? When you're on just one more Zoom call, are you tired of Zoom? I mean, my goodness. Just one Zoom call after another, but still in the middle, you say, my God, it's a great God. My God, it's a great God. I can remember times being so discouraged and feeling like things were just awful and hard. When Lori and I first got married, I loved being with her, but all of a sudden we were 1,500 miles away from every friend and everybody we knew, and we were in a different place and we didn't know anybody. We were in Texas, a whole different culture. It's like a different planet. And, and just thinking, my God is a great God. He brought us here. My God is a great God. When I think about the difficulties that we've had to endure over the last few weeks. Oh, my God is a great God. I don't understand everything. I don't know the why, but do I believe my God is a great God? Absolutely. My God is a great God. He's going to step in and do things like what we never imagined. You know, I can remember years ago that I really felt like that God wanted me to go to Brazil and teach. And I was like, I had one friend in Brazil, and they invited me to come. And so I said, well, I'm not so sure if I can get there or not. And I was about $800 or $900 short of the money that I needed to go. And I said, and I've never done this before, but I really felt convinced that what I was supposed to do, I was supposed to go and go down there and teach. And so I put the rest of my expenses on a credit card and took off. And I'm sitting there going, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I did that. The first night that I'm there, I didn't even know it, but they wanted me to, they had this national radio show they wanted me to speak on the first night. And I'm like, well, that was kind of nice. That was weird. 2 nights later, they wanted me to be on TV and to preach on TV in Brazil. And I was like, this is crazy. And I got finished preaching, and a guy walked over to me. Now, I'm in Brazil, and they don't have American currency there. It's not easy to get. And he reached into his pocket of his shirt, and he pulled out, and he handed me $1,000. I went, my God is a great God. Because I said, no, I don't need that. He said, no. He said, God told me to give you this, that you needed it. I was like, my God is a great God. And so I think that's the song of our heart. That's what just yearning to get out. If you're a Christ follower, sometimes we push that down, but it's just yearning to get out. It's what should be wanting to come out of us. So my question, do you come to worship with something that just needs to get out? Has that ever happened to you? Because what I would suggest to you is that worship is about thanksgiving instead of expectation. See, I understand that, God, I need this, and God, I need that, and God, I need you to do all these other things. But there should be times when you come to worship, and it's from a posture of thanksgiving. You're very grateful for what God is doing in you and through you, and so you're very thankful for what's happened. And I would also tell you that worship is not about emptiness, but it's about fullness. Because see, I get it. People say, I need to come to worship and get my tank filled up. Yeah, every now and then that happens. We need to come to worship and get our tank filled up. But sometimes we should just be getting our tank topped off, because we're living with our relationship with the Lord is so much and so growing and so powerful because of who he is in us that we don't need to be. We're not completely empty. That shouldn't happen all the time. But we should be instead in a place where he says, hey, I got something for you. But we're not going, hey, I need everything. That shouldn't be that way all the time. We shouldn't always be empty when we come to worship. There are times we should come really full and just like, I got to let this out, what God has done in my life. I think what happens sometimes is we come to church and when we sing God a job description, oh, God, fill me. Oh, God, help me. Oh, God, love me. Oh, God, take care of me. And what happened to coming and telling God how great he is? What happened to coming and opening up to him and saying, you are a great God? Instead of saying, hey, I need you to do this for me and this for me and this for me and this for me. He's God. He's created the universe. He's not a butler. See, if we're all empty and we come to church to get full, that means that God he's just relief for us. And God is not a nurse. He's God. There's so much more to him than just, so you need this, and would you like that extra large? Sure. Because it turns out the worship is not just about us. It's not about us at all. And so, and so if you come here and say, you know what? I'm just tired of that song. I don't like that song. Why don't we do this song? Why does Arthur have to say that? Why do I have to park over here? Why do I have to? And if it comes, and why is it always so cold? And why is it always so hot? And if it's all about us all the time, and we're like, but no, it's not for us. We're the gathered body of believers come together to worship the Lord. And so because so many churches have this mindset, we want to make sure everybody is really happy. That's why I think we see in some places in America, we see that the church is growing larger, but it's shrinking in influence. Because we're not making a big deal about God. We're making a big deal about how many people show up and how good was the music and how good was the coffee and how cool were the scooters out in the parking lot. I think what this means, in another way, Jesus would say it, is the salt is losing its saltiness. We're not the people that God really has called us to be. So I would say that worship, number one, is about how we approach God's presence. Number two, worship is motivated by God's nature. What does that mean? It means by who he is. So look at the next verse. It says, for the Lord is a great God, a great king above all gods. And so everybody's got a God, but our God is greater than all gods. And he goes on and he says, in his hand are the depths of the earth. The heights of the mountains are his also. The sea is his, for he made it, and his hands formed the dry land. And one of the things that happens to us is we like God being like this, because we can keep him where we want him, and we can let him out when we want to, and we can put him back where we want to. And if we have a small God, we can control him, and we can sort of be in charge, and we sort of like that. And so I've got this quote I want to read to you, and it's from John Piper. And if you don't read John Piper, you should start reading John Piper. And you should, because he writes really good stuff. But let me read this to you. He says, the really wonderful moments of joy in this world are not the moments of self-satisfaction. This idea of like, wow, look at what I've done. Look at what I've accomplished. Look at what everything that's happened in my life. He says, that's not what's really so great. Look at what I've accomplished. Look at what I did. Look at the money in my bank account. He says, no. He says, but not self-satisfaction, but self-forgetfulness, realizing there are great moments in our life when we realize it's not all about us, but it's all about God. He says, standing on the edge of the Grand Canyon and contemplating your own greatness is pathological. He says, if you can stand on the edge of the Grand Canyon and look at all the grandeur that's there and go, you know what? I'm pretty amazing. I drove myself out here. I got here, and here I am. Yeah, he says, you're missing it. He says, at such moments, we are made for a magnificent joy that comes from outside ourselves. It is about the greatness of God, not the significance of man. God made man small and the universe big to say something about himself. And God is a big God, and God loves himself. He loves himself the most, because if he did not, he would be an idol worshiper. He can't love somebody more than he would love himself, because that would make him an idol worshiper. And so here's the thing. If we just leave ourselves to ourselves, you know what happens? We will become the greatest person you've ever met. This is what we do. Left to ourselves, we become the greatest person we've ever met. Look how smart I am. Look what I've accomplished. Look what I've done. Look who I'm married. Look at my kids. Look at my car. Look at my house. Look at my stuff. And we become so self-deluded. I mean, and so what happens is that we need a God-sized view of God. We don't need this little tiny view of God. We need this giant, humongous view of God, because God is a big God. Now, why do we need that? We need a big view of God so that we can be properly humbled. Because otherwise, if we're not, what will happen is we'll think we're all full of ourselves. You know, it was a few weeks ago. It's why we've been in the middle of this pandemic madness that we've been in the middle of for the last few weeks. And I don't know, it's 2, 3, 4 weeks ago. I can't remember exactly right now. But I taught one week. We just finished a series called How to Relationship. So one week I taught about marriage. And, you know, and I got home that Sunday afternoon, and I was kind of like, I was a little full of myself. And Lori said, well, you're kind of, you know, da-da-da-da-da today. And I said, yeah. I said, I think people are really picking up what I was putting down today. And she said, what are you talking about? She said, I said, we had tons and tons of people asking questions. I said, we ran out of time. We couldn't talk about the things that we wanted to talk about. And she went, Now, see, you don't understand. See, I love her. And see, and one of the reasons I love her, and I told her this a couple weeks ago, as far as I know, she has never a single time ever in her life lied to me. She's always honest to me. Now, she's only done about 3 wrong things. Now, I think she's probably done about 4,000 wrong things. But in reality, before the Lord, she's probably done 3. But anyway, I'm making that up completely. But anyway, the next morning, I'm getting out of bed. And she says, Arthur. And I said, yes, because I know she's getting ready to be truthful with me. And I don't always appreciate her being truthful with me, right? And she says, wounds from a friend are better than kisses from an enemy. I'm sitting there going, oh, God, here it comes. And she said, let me tell you something. She said, that thing you did yesterday, you could have done a lot better. I feel like you kind of melded in a little bit. I went, and I wanted to say, no, I didn't. And I said, maybe I did. Maybe I did. She said, there's so much more you could have said. And she wasn't presenting it in a mean way. She's just sharpening me up, right? But see, she can sharpen me up, but also the Lord uses her also to keep me humble. So we need a God-sized view of God, because otherwise we'll just think that it's all about us. We need to realize that he's big and we're small, so that we stay humble. Another reason is we need a God-sized view of God is to facilitate worship. You don't want to worship something that you think is not more significant than you are. You'll never, ever do it. Let me show you this. It's Isaiah chapter 40. Give you a good idea of the bigness of God. Starting in verse 12, it says, who has measured the waters in the hollow of his hand? Who's held all the oceans, all the lakes, all the rivers, all the seas, all the streams, all the creeks? Who holds all those in his hands? Right? And has marked off the heavens with the span. As big as the heavens are, it goes, they're about that big. Enclosed the dust of the earth in a measure, and weighed the mountains in scales and the hills in a balance. It says, who has measured the Spirit of the Lord, or what man shows him his counsel? Whom did he consult? I mean, did God ask anybody? No, of course not. He says, and who made him understand? Who taught him the path of justice and taught him knowledge and showed him the way of understanding? And then he says, behold, I love this word, right? Behold, the nations are like a drop from a bucket. If somebody could arrange it for me to go to the United Nations and have a microphone for about 14 seconds, not very much, I would just like to tell Iran and North Korea and China and Russia and South Africa and Australia and the United States of America that you are nothing. You are a drop in the bucket. That's who you are. You're not all that. The world doesn't revolve around you. It's not our world. It's God's world. I mean, but we have this idea sometimes, and I don't know why. I don't know if it's movies or literature, but we have this idea that God is this mouth-breathing, bent-over little old man. And he's on life support all the time. And that's who he is. No, listen, I don't know if you've ever lived in a town small enough where everybody went to Dairy Queen on Friday and Saturday night. But some guy comes rolling up in the parking lot, and that guy's got on a Wrangler denim shirt with pearl button snaps. You know what I'm talking about? And it's a little bit too tight, and he struts just a little bit, and somebody says something to him, and he just pulls that thing off, those buttons pop off, and he says, come on over here. I'll handle you. And everybody kind of goes, ooh. Okay. In my mind, that's a much better picture of God than this decrepit, mouth-breathing, bent-over old man. Because God ain't scared. He ain't worried. He's God. And all the nations are dropping a bucket, right? And he says, Lebanon would not suffice for fuel. Next verse. Lebanon might suffice for fuel, nor are its beasts enough for a burnt offering. He says, all the nations are as nothing before him. They are accounted by him as less than nothing and emptiness. And he says, to whom then will you liken God, or what likeness compare with him? Worship is motivated by God's nature. Next thing is that worship involves intimacy. Worship involves intimacy. Remember I told you that the psalm starts in verse 1, oh come. And it says, it's come on. And then it says in verse 6, it says it again, oh come. It says that's how it's translated in English. But here it's come in. Come in. And so when we worship, this is what we're doing. Come on. Come in. Let's go. Let's be intimate. Don't just stand there. Don't just sit there. Come on and come in. It's both. And you'll see somebody who understands leading worship. And we lead worship through teaching. We lead worship through singing. We lead worship all kinds of ways. But you see somebody who understands worship and leading worship, that they start with, come on, let's go. And then come in. Let's be intimate with our Heavenly Father. That's what's going on right there. So it's come on and come in. It's not either or, it's both and. And it goes on in the next verse 7. He says, for he is our God, and we are the people of his pasture and the sheep of his hand. So when he says he is our God, it begs the question, what kind of God is he? What kind of God is he? Because what we've got to do, we've got to figure out, are we worshiping out of ritual? Are we just doing it because everybody else is doing it? Or are we worshiping out of reality because it's something that God has done in our lives ourselves? So what kind of God is he? So let me show you real quick. In Luke chapter 15, verse 1, it says, now the tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to him. So we're talking about Jesus. And so Jesus is getting ready to tell them this parable. And the Pharisees and the scribes grumbled, saying, this man receives sinners and eats with them. He's having a problem with them. And, hey, why are you hanging out with sinners? Because this God, Jesus, who is God in the flesh, as we like to say around here, God in the bod, as he shows up and says, hey, here's who I am. And he's hanging out with sinful people. And so he told them this parable. And so he tells them this parable. He says, listen, here's what happens. This guy had a sheep and he couldn't find it. And then there's somebody else who had a coin and couldn't find it, but went looking for them. And then it says, but there was somebody who had a son, and the son had been there and then ran away and was lost. And as the son comes to the end of himself, he's like, I've done a terrible thing. I'm somewhere I shouldn't be. And he says, but when he came to himself, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread, but I perish here with hunger? He says, I will rise and go to my father. And I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants. And so he arose and came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him, felt compassion, and ran, embraced him, and kissed him. That's what kind of Father God we have. It doesn't matter where you've been or what you've done or what's going on. He still wants this relationship with you. That's what kind of God he is. When you've been forgetting him, when you've been full of yourself and chasing your own dreams, doing your own thing, being somewhere that you ought not to be, he says, I still want you. I don't care what you did. I don't care where you were. You said, well, Arthur, if he really loved me, you know, and when I'm in the middle of something, because, I mean, this son who's in a pigsty, feeding pigs, that's like a Jewish person going to a deli and ordering a ham sandwich. It would never happen. It's despicable to them. So, well, why does the father stay home? Why does the father stay home? Because he loves you so much, he doesn't want to control you. See, for people who are sitting here thinking, and maybe you're watching this morning or online or wherever you might be, right? And you sit there and you say, well, if God really loved me, he'd come get me out of this mess. If he really cared about me, he would change everything. He'd fix everything immediately. What the Bible teaches is if you will look toward him, yeah, he'll come running towards you. If you say, yeah, I want to, he'll come running towards you. But he's not going to pick you up and make you be somewhere that you don't have to be. Because once you've been home, once you're a believer, once you've trusted Jesus and you decide you're going to walk away from him, is he looking for you? Yeah. Is he going to make you come back? No. But is he going to welcome you back? Absolutely. Absolutely. So next verse, Psalm 95, he says, today, if you hear his voice, he says, do not harden your hearts as at Meribah, as on the day at Massah in the wilderness, where he's talking about a couple of times where the people of Israel hardened their hearts toward God. So today, if you are hearing God tap you on the shoulder, your heart is soft toward him, he says, listen, don't push him away. If he's calling to you right now and you're stuck somewhere, you're in a pit, you're in a mess, and you want to get out of there, he says, hey, come get me. Don't harden your hearts. He says, when your fathers put me to the test and put me to the proof, though they had seen my work. And this is the verse that's going to be hard for some people to hear. And he's talking about the children of Israel when they turned their backs on him. And he says, look, I'm God. This makes people uncomfortable, but he says, I'm God. He says, for 40 years, I loathed that generation. God said, look, I've had enough of you. You know, and the truth is, I mean, we can sugarcoat it all we want to, but there's a day coming when every single person will stand before God. And on that day, there's going to be no excuses, no stories, no, well, what about this and how about that? None of that. That day is coming. He is God. He's not our butler. He says, I love that generation, said they are a people who go astray in their heart and they have not known my ways. He says, therefore I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter my rest, which is the New Testament talks about rest, talking about referring to us having a relationship with God through his son Jesus. And so we get back this whole thing, talking about why doesn't God come pull us out of that pit we're in when we're stuck, and when you're feeding the pigs, why didn't he come get you? Why do you have to look to him and then he comes to get you? Because God doesn't need his mind changed about sin. We do. See, if he came and just got you and pulled you out of it, your sin would not be offensive to you. But when we realize, oh, what I'm doing is wrong, yeah, it creates this need for God, this need to know him and to follow him. Because ultimately, worship starts and stops in your heart. Our emotions don't create our reality. This stuff we feel, and somebody's similar. Oh, I just feel Jesus. I got the Jesus measles on my head. I can just feel him. You know, I'm in worship, and I'm doing this, or I'm clapping, whatever. And no, that's our emotions don't create our reality. That's not really what's going on. In reality, it's our emotions that cause us to wander. You know, there's that old song, we're prone to wander. Because what happens to us, man, we are just walking with God, and we're step by step by step by step walking with God. And then you get a text from that girl, and nothing else matters. You get that letter in the mail, and you went, oh, nothing else matters. You look in your bank account, and it's what was there 3 weeks ago is not there today. Nothing else matters. And that's what happens. It just takes one little thing. And we're prone to wander. Because our hearts get out of tune. So my question today, where's your heart out of tune? Where's your heart out of tune? What needs to be tuned up? What is it that's been stopping you from worship? What's been keeping you from that? And so today I want us to take a moment and consider what's been stopping us from declaring God's worth in our life. Who is it? What is it that's been stopping that? And then I want us to spend some time worshiping our great God. That's the idea. Maybe some questions for you to think about. These are homework questions, but you can look at these right now in this moment too. And think about this. Look at how great is your God? I mean, is he this great or greater than you can even begin to describe? Where's your heart out of tune? Where does it need to be tuned up? Where does God need to take his tuning wrench and tune your heart a little bit?